Ladies and gentlemen, I have Chris Masimore with me here today for the important reason of we need to talk about all of the secret murders that are not secrets that happen in our country at the hands of I don't know, people like Boeing, but so many others.
Oh yeah,
the nearly time-honored American.
I was just gonna say they're carrying on a time-honored American tradition. They really are.
They killed the guy that invented the windshield wiper because he wouldn't give up his patent. There's a movie about that, by the way. That, I forget what it's called, but it's probably on streaming somewhere. And it's like, I just remember it was like really intense, and then it turned out that it's like, oh yeah, it's the guy that, because like cars like didn't have those at first. Like they didn't have seatbelts. They didn't have all these things. They invented a motor with wheels, and then kind of slowly added safety measures to it or whatever. But yeah, there was a time when it's just kind of like, well, you can't go driving around in the rain. But not that long ago, you couldn't go riding your horse around in the rain. So, I mean, that's just how life is. And some guy's like, what if we could actually fix this? And they're like, we'll kill you. Like, we're the car company, so we're just going to take your patent and then just, like, fuck you up. Like, yeah, that was, like, in the early 50s or late 40s, whenever that would have been, when people just drove the most dangerous, life-threatening cars that we've, like, ever had.
There also have been people that have maybe tried to come up with engines that run on water or hydrogen, and they also met some untimely fates.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how, in light of recent things, how like kind of brushed aside, like, okay, someone would come up with like an alternative to gasoline, or someone would, like all of this stuff, then they would always die, and everyone would just be like, well, that's just like a crazy thing. You can't really run an engine like that. And it's just like, well, it is awfully weird though that rather than like they tried to make it work and then it didn't, they just died of like 2 gunshot wounds in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And they're just like, that can happen or whatever. And then now in our much more transparent era, the amount of these things that are so clearly happening kind of gives us pause to look back over history a little bit.
Well, to be clear, the first of those 2 Boeing guys did die in a hotel room, I believe, and they have officially ruled it a suicide, even though I believe he went on Fox News and CNN right before his death and did the whole, they're after me and my family and I'm not suicidal, and if something happens to me, I was murdered, and then magically he committed suicide, I guess.
And that's always a thing that adds credence to these stories. However, I must say, just for the sake of argument, that were I to find myself suicidal and in the limelight for some reason, of the first thing I would say is like, now listen, if I turn up dead, these people killed me. Like, I'm not suicidal, and then I would go kill myself, and they'd be like, oh my god, because it's like, if you're gonna go with a laugh. That's I think even like Hunter Thompson said that. He's like, I would never kill myself, but then his family was like in the house at the time, and they're like, yeah. He just kind of started giving away all of his stuff, and then like wrote this note that pretty clearly was like he's just miserable because he's all fucked up from a life of being Hunter Thompson. He just let himself out with a barrel of steel, the way a real man does.
I kind of started to believe the David Grush stuff, that latest UFO guy, when they started going after him for like being an alcoholic, because I was like, wait a minute, I'm like, first off, 3/4 of America are alcoholics, number one. Number two,
that's if you count everybody. This is a man with like a hard job. That's like all.
What I was just gonna say is like, you're literally listening to this guy testify about how he maybe like knows that there's aliens and that they've hurt human beings and that other human beings have hurt human beings to try and keep this secret. But like, why would a guy like that want to like come home and like have a cocktail and like black out,
stuff it down with a little brown? Like, all the drunks on. I mean, the reason a few generations ago everyone was an alcoholic is because everyone was in a pretty bad war. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it would have been like fun to be in the Gulf War, but I mean, being in like the Korean War, World War II is like also, kind of a mess.
I would assume too, if you're a whistleblower, that like, whether it's a giant company, a defense company, whatever it is, if you're a big whistleblower too, I would also think there's levels to it where like the last thing is blowing the whistle. Like, that might be number 10 on the list, but like alcoholism is like number 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, first I started getting pissed off and like, taking it out on my spouse. Then I started drinking too much. Then I started like not coming home and just sitting at the bar. And then I'm like, just barely hanging on to keep this job. And then it's like 9 steps later is like, fuck it. I'm going to just like ruin my family and everybody's life to just like blow the whistle on this thing. And
well, it's a real alcoholic move too, and it's it's not the move that someone who's an alcoholic for a different reason tends to make. Like someone who's just genetically a drunk, like myself,
Some alcoholics are made.
And my forebears,
nature and nurture.
I don't believe because of the timing of birth. There's been 4 John Wesley Wheelers, and like not a one of them was in any major war. It's like that thing in Forrest Gump where they show Lieutenant Dan's like family dying, and just every single one of us was just like a civil engineer at the time, just being like, it's like a little too young, a little too old. Yep. Like, it's just like, and yet all of us drink like we killed a bunch of dudes in the Pacific Theater. Like, it's amazing for no reason whatsoever. And I'm proud of that, but. Generally speaking, that is why a lot of people, like if you watch, obviously like Mad Men's one of my favorite things in the world, and they really do get into the details a little bit of like casually everyone with the worst, because everyone was drinking on that, but like the people who were considered drunks among those people, like it would always come out over time that it's like, oh yeah, they actually like strangled 17 guys in Okinawa with their bare hands, like the guys that actually like had a big body count in the whatever, like. Yeah. A lot of them World War II, some of them Korea in that show. Like, oh yeah, that's why that guy is like. They never come right out and say it either. Yeah. They just let you piece it together. It's just like the people who are just the drunks that like mess up a pitch meeting. It's just kind of like or piss their pants or something. It's just like stabbed a bunch of dudes with their bayonet in like a mustard gas filled trench. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, they kind of tend to drink a bit, and it's like, well, what's close to that? Like, oh, I don't know, working for the biggest, most terrifying like empire on Earth, like directly, and knowing that they have aliens, for example, and kind of not being able to do anything about it, and also not knowing that it's not like it's just like an episode of Elf where it's just fun and cute. It's like no, they're like people's eyes are just getting sucked out of their skulls with things. It's like okay, like those people are gonna drink. Additionally, I don't remember what we were talking about, but my wife and I were having a conversation about this not that long ago. I think it was when everybody was just like, just cumming their panties about finally getting men back or like whatever. It was 2017 or 18 or whatever. Like some people started coming out of the woodwork and saying like Martin Luther King Jr. was he was an alcoholic and kind of like he slept with like a lot of women. I'm like, okay, well, A... He lived in like the 1950s and 60s, and B, every great man that's had like the whole world trying to kill him, and he's like trying to make them. Of course, he did that. People that did less stressful things did that. It didn't stick, by the way. They're like, oh yeah, what? We're gonna stop listening to him just because he liked whores and booze? No, if we have to stop listening to everybody, it's
that goes back to the. Oh, he did what 75% of people did in his time.
That is a conservative number, my friend. But
I'm trying to be nice here. I'm trying to be generous.
And he was like a handsome man that knew how to wear a suit and give a speech. Are you kidding? That's like being in like an actual band people like. Yeah. It's like he probably had to like whenever he was behaving himself, it was probably active. He's like, I have to try not to fuck these bitches. Like, it's just he's all sweaty all the time because he knows what he did. But it's like, that's going to make you drink too. Yeah. And you drink to the point where you get the courage. Yeah. Because, that's what, you know that, like him, for example, you're going to get assassinated. Like, this is just a foregone conclusion. He made sure he was good with God. But it's like, you get good and sauced up and just go up there and start saying beautiful poetic things that expose the truth. Like, that's not a thing a sober person does.
Well, let me ask you this, though, too, which also goes into there being at least some aspects of whistleblowing that are uniquely American, is that, who was the first whistleblower, in human history? Because in a lot of ways, there was probably people blowing the whistle for generations. It's just they get murdered right away because they're, America's kind of been one of the first countries where, you could blow the whistle and, you're only gonna get severely harassed and your family's life ruined and maybe murdered instead of for sure just all of you are going to the fucking gallows right now.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that we're supposed to have freedom of speech. Like everybody gets all hot in the pocket about that, and it's like when it's proven that we do. And we do. It's better than living in certainly North Korea. China, arguably, probably for sure. Russia, yeah, they disappear a lot of journalists in Russia, and we've been over that a few times. But like here, it's like we're supposed to be better than that, and then everybody just gets so surprised when we're obviously not.
Yeah.
Like there's just so much money involved, and we're gonna want to honor some bozo's freedom of his First Amendment rule. It's like the people. It's like, yeah, I have like more guns than anyone would ever need, but it's just like when people wear those shirts and are like, "What part of shall not be infringed do you not understand?" And it's like, yeah, most of the amendments actually don't fly. I don't know why you think that one's so important. It's like you think you have freedom of speech up until you're like, oh yeah, turns out my employer has just been like dumping radioactive waste rods into a playground where there's children who keep turning up bald, and I go and point it out, and then it's just like suddenly like, yeah, I decided to just ram my self-driving car into like a pylon, and it's just because things like that happen, and then they sprinkle crack on you, like Dave Chappelle said, and it's like, oh.
Well, here's another question too, is that goes, because I also came across a YouTube video that was legitimately, it was like a TED Talk that said TED Talk, how to be a CIA whistleblower. Now, I for sure did not watch this because I don't want to see it or know anything about whatever that's about. But because it made me think of the question of like, also, have there been whistleblowers, especially with like defense contractors, that maybe subterfuge is a strong word, but the type of thing where like, because like, if you were a real CIA whistleblower, we'd never know your name because you'd just be fucking dead.
Yeah. And they're already... And CIA so guys are kind of cloudy anyway, just in case something happens. It's like, he disappeared, but he never existed, did he?
And so it's like a TED Talk seems like that could be like, I wonder if there have been whistleblowers that have sort of been disinformation of like, yeah, we're going to blow the whistle on this thing because it like looks good for TV, but nobody's going to give a shit in 2 months, and it's going to totally keep you from not talking about this thing over here that's actually like maybe murdering people or making somebody a lot of money that they don't want to talk about. Yeah,
well, that's the real thing, isn't it? The whole the like, because like if you imagine in, I don't know, like the Red Scare, like the Joseph McCarthy thing, it's like if you're like back then, let's say you're like, hey, something fucked up is happening. It's like, well, that would be counterproductive or intuitive to the Cold War effort, and therefore you're a commie spy, and you're going to jail forever, and we can just make up basically anything we want. Like that's what used to happen. But then the other thing is you can actually do that. Like I can just make things up like a commie spy to try to fuck everything over. It's like. Or the commies just do give people, or whoever, I always use the commies, it's funny, but like, they did actually pay this guy to come out against this thing who actually, it's like a snake eating its own tail for infinity, because it's like, if you were like, oh, I'm going to pay this guy to come out and say all this shitty stuff about Lockheed Martin, and it's like to try to destabilize them, but it's like, yeah, they were doing all of that though, like, it's like you paid someone to go and like either make something up or blow, but it's like, so you're like, oh, you're just doing this on purpose for money or for whatever to try to fuck everything up. And it's like, but it's just, there's nobody, barely anything exists with no blood on their hands. If you think about like the size of the business we work for, and then some of the stories we've heard, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and then you just multiply that times like, oh, there's like a room of like 50 people with like Lamborghinis and summer homes they don't really want to give up. And they're like, and I don't think I'm unique in this. I'm just, part of my comedy is that I'm more honest than I should be, and it's funny. But I think people laugh at it because it's like, oh, he's saying it out loud, man. It's like, oh yeah, if I was like in a boardroom and they're just kind of like, do you want an extra $2 million this year? I'd be like, yeah, it's like 27 people are going to die. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. So what are we having for lunch? Yeah. Like, I'd just be sitting there thinking about all of the debt that's going away and the things that I could buy. Like, and I do understand that when someone has $100 billion, it gets kind of insane that they're like, but it's like if I was a guy like, there's lifestyle creep. I'm making $1 million a year, but I'm living in Manhattan, and it's like I'm barely scraping by. The wife doesn't work, because I'm trying to like, it's just like an Etsy business or whatever. So someone's just kind of like, oh yeah, like you're gonna get a $2 million bonus, but it's like this is gonna like poison all these people. Just my first question would be like, well, are they gonna figure out that we did this or anything? Like, oh no. I'm like, Yeah, all right. It's like I would never. Like I don't know. I don't like as like a regular poor person when I hear about something like that. I'm like, well, they shouldn't do that or whatever. Or when something happens right in front of me, like I rescued a child the other day. Just in a counterpoint to that thing I just said, which I'm definitely being honest.
Do tell.
That if someone handed me a bunch of money and they were like, you don't have to do it, but this is probably going to like quintuple the cancer rate in this one part of the world, is be like, yeah, is it going to happen anywhere near where I live? And I'd just be like, no, I'll take the money then. It's like, I'm going to take a few weeks off. So, and I know where I'm not going on vacation, but I was pulling up to work the other day, and I have to get this out. And we have a code that you put into the gate. And I got out of my car and I went to type in the code, but like right when I opened the door to get out, I heard just like screeching, like screaming. And there's like some houses in the neighborhood, and there's sometimes kids in the front yard. So I didn't think too much, but it was pretty pointed and kind of blood curdling. And also there was like no other kids around. And I'm like, okay, this is a little out of place. So I started actually like looking around. You know, mind you, this is 8 in the fucking morning. And I see like what has to be at maximum like a 2-year-old, just diaper, no other clothes, just running dead center down the middle of the street. Now, work isn't on a terribly busy street, but eventually that street where the kid was running leads to Hennepin, and it gets busy fast.
Yeah.
And also there's like a lot of industrial area around there where there's like people just like living in their weird vans and stuff. And I'm like, that's nowhere this neighborhood, if you're a stray 2-year-old, like probably the right person will find you and bring you home. Like, yeah, it's Minneapolis, but it's pretty homey around here. Like, your odds would be okay. Northeast Minneapolis, which everyone's like, oh, that's the cooler one. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you want to just be like a loose kid in like this industrial zone where there's some like real grody kind of older dudes working in these shady things everywhere. I don't know. I don't know if I want to be a naked little kid in that situation. So kids running down the street screaming like, mommy, mommy, just really upset. And I'm like, oh no. And I look around, there's like nobody else around. So I'm like, fuck. Okay. Somebody's testing me here. This is what are the fucking odds of this? The Lord is just, because if I was driving by, I saw this scene like halfway between here and work, I'd kind of look out my window and be like, there's all these other cars around. I'm not stopping in the middle of the road. Whatever. I was out of my car already and the kid was just like kind of running past me. I'm like, okay, I can't do nothing. So I go over there and I'm like, hey buddy, like what? I think boy, when they're little, I don't know, but like, hey man, like, why don't you get out of the middle of the street? You know, you're like barefoot. You know, I talk to kids like they're other grown-ups. It's hard for me to do that. I'm just like, why don't you come here? Like, just get out of the road real quick. And kind of comes over to me like, mommy, screaming. And I'm like, where's mommy? Like, over there? I assume you probably live right over there from what I've seen. I don't know. But let's like get up on the sidewalk maybe real quick because there's like cars. And then the kid like does calm it down a second, won't start like talking to me or anything or pointing just yet, but comes up and gives me the 2-hand grab on my hand. Now I'm a big, strange, weirdo, like white guy just like sitting there. It's like, hey, like you're really upset. Would you like to come with me? Like, so it could be that that kid just didn't have any sense of anything, but I still kind of feel like running up and being like that, like, save me, stranger. Something bad happened to that kid's house, which is way out of my pay grade, where I'm like, okay, look, if I have to walk you back to your house, I can do that. If there's something terrible happening to you at your house, I kind of don't, I guess, like, you're just coming into work with me to, like, meet, Wally and Leah, and we're going to call the cops, and our morning meeting is just going to be about this now. Yeah. But, or whatever, I was kind of running through, like, all right, well, I want to close my car door, but it's like I don't want to put a weird kid I don't want to just load the kid into my car because if someone randomly sees it out of context. And speaking of, like, right as I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, this kind of nice SUV pulls up and just this angel rolls down the window. Just this white lady, probably maybe early 30s, looks like she probably does Pilates, kind of in shape with some real not therapist, what's the word? Social worker energy. It's just kind of like, hey, what's happening? And I'm like, this kid's running down the street screaming, like, I don't know. And I see that she has a kid like the same age in her car. And she's like, oh, okay. And she like pulls around the corner to park. And the kid's like kind of like starting to relax a little. So I'm like, all right, well, come on. I'm just holding this little kid's hand like I never want to do. And just like walking down the sidewalk. Let's go over here. The lady. And then she kind of starts talking to the kid and is like, all right, do you live over there? And the kid is kind of being responsive to her. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to work then. And she's like, yeah, okay. And it's like, either that lady is like a really, really clever serial killer or, everything worked out. But the timing of it, which is hard to actually put in the story because it involves just my emotions as things roll out, was like me going, I don't want to deal with this. Fuck, I kind of feel like I have to deal with this. And as soon as I gave into that, God said, like, we just wanted to see if you would. Here's a nice lady. Here's exactly the only person who you would pass this kid off to. It's not like some guy named Gus, like, hey, you ever just pulls up in a garbage truck. I'll take it from here, kid. You know, just why don't you come on in here? And I'd be like, maybe we don't want that. But no, just precisely. And I'm not saying it's not important that she was white, but she just had that look of someone who would throw their whole day away for like a strange kid. Just be like, they'd like jump over a fence to help a dog in a crack house. You know, it's like, okay, you're gonna do the right thing. So I was like, I just accepted responsibility, and it was immediately taken from me because it's like, oh no, you'll fuck this up. Just hand it off. Just hand it off. But I just want, as we delve deeper into this whistleblower thing and, you know, my whole constant theory of would you really give up the summer home for strangers on the other side of the world? I don't know. I did do that. However, I would also sign a piece of paper that says, like, a staggering amount of people die for me to make not like $100, mind you. I just mean like, I don't have to worry about the mortgage now. I can just pay my house off. Like, yeah. And then it's just like, I don't know. They were probably gonna. If you live somewhere where if you live somewhere and in a situation where someone like me can listen to someone else, sign a piece of paper, and then you just get like radioactive crap dumped all over you, you're probably gonna die horribly anyway. Like, they don't just do that in the Upper West Side or Edina. It's just kind of like, although that would be kind of funny. It's like, we're definitely blowing up the Edina Mall, John. Now, if you're willing to be quiet about this, there's big places for you to go in this company. It's just more like, oh yeah, this textile factory, like, we're just removing all these expensive safety protocols there. But it was probably going to blow up anyway, you know, like, what are you going to do?
I would have thrown that kid in the sewer for $50.
Yeah!
No, I'm kidding. I feel like that is a very, actually, I make that fucked up joke because that is just such a fucked up situation that, like,
oh, yeah, I witnessed probably the tail end of something pretty bad that wasn't about to stop either, but...
Because I've had that situation a few different times, and I'm sure a lot of people have, with dogs. Find somebody's dog loose, you know what I mean? But obviously, like, yeah, kid, that's a lot heavier, you know?
That is, and I'm... Like, the funny thing is at the time, I wasn't even thinking about... I joked about it later, but, like, I wasn't really thinking about what... Like, I just didn't want to get pee in my leather seats in my car, you know? It's like, when I was like, I don't want someone to see me, like, stuffing this kid in my car. It's like, well, I'm going into a building to go to, like, work, and I'm driving, like, a Mini Cooper, which isn't a huge, you know, child. You want more room than that if you're going to steal children, so obviously it's not a man who would... But later on, I'm like, damn, like, that's the thing, that the dog might just decide to attack you because you're just trying to help a strange dog, although you don't know what's going on with that. But the kid might be like... Well, I tried to, like, get them to come with me, and then they broke their ankle, and then somebody saw it, and then their parents sued me when I should have just gone inside and ignored it and let the sewer alligators just have the kid or whatever. Like, you know, that there are good Samaritan laws that kind of, like, protect you. And in other countries, certainly not this one, there's laws that kind of do punish you for seeing something like that and then going, like, I'm not helping this guy in the street or whatever. They're like, you can't just, like... let this guy die without at least calling. And all you have to do is, like, call 911. You don't have to, like, really do anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, you just do something. You're just like, hey, somebody, I need an adult.
No, I feel like despite what it might seem sometimes, I think you and I both have a pretty reasonable moral compass. You know what I mean? I think we just enjoy to say awful things.
Yeah.
But I don't really, like...
I don't necessarily want bad things to happen. Look, all I'm saying is two things. One... If I see bad things happening in front of me, I do feel compelled to help. Yeah. And I've been there a few times too, where it's like, it's actually like fun. Like, I don't know, because there is like a disconnectedness to being a dude, not to like gender things exactly, but I think like, you know, women will always definitely help people, but they'll get like, again, I'm broad stroking this just from what I've seen and stuff, but they'll kind of get emotionally invested, like, oh my God, are you okay? Guys, it turns into like a heist movie, but we're doing good. It's like, you're like, you know, if there's like a car on fire and you can help an old lady, I was like, bro, we gotta go. Yeah, you just start making friends with strangers and you're like, yeah, we're gonna like get you out of here. There's times like the Blue Felix bus stopped because that guy like drove off a bridge and we all were like running out there to go like try to help, and it was just like exciting. We're like, we're gonna save the day. We're gonna go like help this guy out of his car or whatever. Like, you feel compelled to, but it's kind of like fun or whatever. So it's like, and it's gotta be, it's like why sex feels good. It's just this evolutionary thing that it's like, tell you what, if you guys see like a kid caught in a burning car, you're gonna if you all like cooperate to try to get the kid out of there. Like you be lookout, you call 911. It's gonna feel great. It's gonna just be like you're in a Ghostbuster or something. Like it's just gonna be an absolute blast. Like, and you won't have any PTSD. You're just gonna drink beer and talk about how awesome you all were for like helping. I do feel like it's a little harder on women where they're like, I hope that kid's okay, and I don't know that I did enough. And now that's still built in to make sure that they help. But they just nature gave them kind of a less fun.
Right.
Version of it. It's just kind of like you're gonna want to help, but it's gonna like break your heart a little bit or whatever. And it's like we're just like, hey, we did something today, And but it sucked. I was by myself though. See, that was the thing. If like Wally had walked outside, then it's a buddy cop movie. Then we're just like, oh, well, what do you here? I'll call 911 if you want to. You have kids, like just see if you can't calm them down. Show them, jingle your keys. You're like a real dad, and I know how to use the phone. Like we're gonna do some teamwork here and just like make this happen. But it's like it's kind of sucks by yourself. You're just like. Okay, yeah. But you still have to. You feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But 100 million% for like not an insignificant amount of money. I would like there's things I buy at the store that probably have in the supply chain so many bodies attached to it, and it's like I don't delude myself, and maybe this isn't healthy, or maybe it's super healthy. I don't delude myself into going like, well, not really. I'm sure I'm doing fine, or I'm just gonna try to think about. I think about it all the time, and I'm just like, well, that's just the way she goes, man. Like it's the way of the road. It's like I'm just buying this ham, and it's just like, oh yeah, a bunch of people died to like make this like cool pair of pants I found, and I know that, and I'm not gonna be like, well. I tried, and I'm like, you can't. There's no ethical consumption out of capitalism. Like,
but that's I was just gonna say
it's impossible.
That's kind of like the real issue with that more broadly. It's like you and I both been in a tour bus and driven past like real commercial farms. The ones where it's like the
ones they don't show on TV unless they warn you, and it's about how it's a news thing about how it's not good.
Yeah, and same with like jobs overseas or whatever else. Like we talked about too, where like people want to bitch about bringing jobs back to America, but at the same time they don't want to not punch each other for a $99 TV on Black Friday. Yeah, that's kind of that's like I don't know if things would equalize if everything was the American economy. Like I don't know if those things ever would equal themselves out. Like in the end, it's like we're always gonna eat beef. We're always like it's just so much of this stuff is baked into the cake now that it sucks. But it's like I don't necessarily advocate tearing down the whole system because I think that's a little short-sighted. But then at the same time, it's like I don't know how much of this big stuff ever changes until that happens. Or a very disruptive thing. Like I don't know. We were talking about earlier how like, or just a quick side note on that. Like my musing is people are like, well, if we made the iPads here, they'd cost like $1 gazillion a piece or whatever. But it's like, yeah, but then that's only because the people that already made that thing got so fucking rich from using factories overseas that's just like the problem. If it had just started that way from the beginning, that like all the cars used to be made here, and most people a lot of people drove them. Like Henry Ford. God rest his Nazi soul, fucking, for all the bad things about him, definitely was like, oh, I pay the people in my factory enough so they can afford my cars. And I'm like, okay. And those were new. Cars are always expensive, and they were like a brand new invention at the time, and they were totally insane. And the people that made them could afford to buy them, like, in this country, in the same company. Yep. Which leads me to believe that it might be possible for, if things hadn't gotten the way they are, to like, oh, we could have flat TVs and iPads, and they'd all be very reasonably priced, even if everything was like being made here. Yeah. Also to the point where maybe more so, because it'd be like, you only have the people here to sell things to, and you only have the people here to hire to make them. Yeah. So it's like, you got to figure that out instead of being like, well, yeah, but we can kind of get it made for 3 cents over here, or we can sell these things that aren't legal here to this country that are where they are legal, and da-da-da-da-da. And it just kind of like monkeys everything up all weird. So it's like, I kind of theorize that, again, like Henry Ford, it's like, it sucks to hold him up, but that example was like probably just how everything would work because it would have to. The market would just be like, yeah, the guys, you can't just pay the guys packaging this food not enough to be able to like eat it because that's who's around to buy it and stuff. And it's like, so you just, when things were like that, you'll note they were kind of better. But, well, I mean, that is basically the nature of the Boeing thing, and most whistleblowers, I would think theoretically, is that they're blowing the whistle on the stuff that is costing people their lives.
Yeah.
But that generally is because we were trying to cut costs and boost.
Yeah, it
profits.
was just
Like,
a
9 times
horrible
out of
cost
10,
cutting thing.
Yeah.
Like they were just like, yeah, just make this thing hollow, or just don't. Yeah, like I read a more in depth thing about it too, where like the people in charge are always like yelling at the engineers and stuff like that. It's being like, well, why does this have to be like this? It's like, well, we. I don't know why. I'm just thinking. I've kind of been back rewatching Archer. There's like a thing where Krieger, their scientist guy, puts a bunch of mods into this car Archer just got, and he's showing them all off, and he's like, push this red button, and he's like, is that gonna kill everybody? Push this blue button. Yeah, but it just sort of this banality of like, hey, can you make this so that like it's safe? I'm like, yeah, it's like, can you do it for no dollars? Like, I could make it so it works. It's like, okay, fine, for whatever. And yeah, that is where you cross into this. It's one thing to get like a chintzy product, or it's just like, yeah, these jeans just come apart a lot faster than they used to in the 90s or whatever. But it's like, that sucks, and you blow the crotch out of them faster. You got to get new jeans from Target or whatever. But also, like, when it comes to airplanes or, I don't know, medical devices, like pacemakers and things, like, it starts getting to where it's like, okay, cheaping out on this is killing. That's where you get into the Fight Club thing, honestly. Yeah. Where it's like, there's people who, and I'm sure the guy in that, Edward Norton's character in that movie was probably the kind of guy that would eventually, actually, no, he threatens to blow the whistle. You remember? He's just like, he's like, you're going to give me 52 paychecks a year, and I can do, and my job will be not to tell anybody the horrible things that I've seen or whatever. And his job was literally like, if this thing that causes people to die in these cars or whatever, like, if it's still cheaper to just pay out for the accidents, then we don't do anything. And if it's more expensive to do that than a recall, then we do a recall, and it's my job to go and kind of figure out. It's like, that's a job. And that's that movie. It's a movie, but I mean, that's entirely a real thing. And some of those guys, they just either keep drinking or start fighting their imaginary friend or whatever, and they're eventually like, you know what? Sitting on a secret is hard.
What do you think the deal is with Boeing? Because the thing I haven't been able to figure out really is like, you have two whistleblowers, they both die, and you could say odd circumstances. I don't know that you could really prove anything. But I do have the question, though, with something like Boeing, when it is about money. At the same time, we've all of a sudden in the past year heard all kinds of, like, sort of ad-lib news stories about different shit happening to Boeing planes. A door rips off here, landing gear didn't work there. And the weird thing to me is that, like, air travel is still, generally speaking, very safe. Like, I'm not going to shit myself about getting on a Boeing plane tomorrow if I had to.
Yeah.
But what's weird is, like, I think shit like that happened all the time anyway, but we're hearing about it now. But I don't know that and the whistleblower thing seems correlated, which I find kind of odd, I guess. I mean, it's like it is, but at the same time is like, I find it weird that a whistleblower would blow the whistle, and then at that same time, you would have all these different Boeing planes just having all these problems, like, simultaneously.
No, I
don't know.
Hang on, though. I actually have a thought about that.
Like, I'm curious your thought, because that's something I've grappled with that I find very odd.
Well, if these guys know what they know, right? They're in a position to really completely objectively have all this information or whatever. They're not a janitor. They're not even a mechanic. There's some like high level white collar thing that's kind of mixed up in the particulars. You know what I mean? Of all the whatever. The odds of someone going, we've kind of been having these shitty practices, and I've been drinking, and I don't, it's like I don't love what I'm seeing. It's whatever. It kind of keeps me up at night a little bit, and then someone has a meeting, and there's a memo, there's all this stuff, and it's like, look, so we're doing away with these, I believe, we consider them to be redundant safety protocols or whatever, because all they're doing is costing us money. It's like, the planes are not falling out of the sky, the wings are not flying off, and it's like, obviously, like, these engineers are just trying to justify their paychecks by overbuilding everything, and there's probably a bunch of anarchists and commies in their mix anyway. You know how creative and industrious people are. It's like we need to stop listening to them and start listening to people who are more like Elon Musk, who just go like, why is this so expensive? And everyone's like, well, there's a reason. Well, you're fired. Here's what we're going to do now. And whatever. And someone was probably privy to that. Then maybe started seeing the first results of it, where he's like, if you do this, this is going to happen. And they're like, oh, shut up. What are you, allergic to money? And then you're like, well, okay. And then like a couple of incidents happens exactly just like the old gypsy lady said. You know, it's like, it's just how you imagined.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, fucking A, like I have to. He talks to his wife and she's like, oh, I mean, you have to do what you think is right. You know, It's like, but we're all going to die. And she's like, well, yeah, I don't know, but I have feelings now about it. So it's like, okay, you gotta do something. So he's like, I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm going to come out and say, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And meanwhile, this takes time. Like, you know, we hear about it, goes to some kind of trial. You know, this is like, oh, okay, there's an inquisition, all this stuff. Meanwhile, this shit's like, that he noticed the very start of because he knew it was going to start happening in the first place, starts just happening more and more, just like we said. So then it's like, it creates this like, well, isn't that a weird coincidence? And then they're like, yeah, I don't think people are going to think this is a coincidence. I think two different people came out and were like, hey, all this stuff is happening and the planes are kind of blowing up way more often. And just like, okay, well, like maybe we'll just do what we used to do in the 50s and kill these dudes and everything will be okay. Yeah. And whatever. And then it's a bigger deal that they mysteriously die because no one ever believes that anymore. Like, you know, thank you, Jeffrey Epstein.
What do you think will actually happen to Boeing?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing?
Not a damn thing. Why? How? Dude, they don't just make commercial airplanes. They're fucking defense contractors. Like, what? That you know, it's like people from like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and BlackRock or whatever could just like probably just like shoot someone on the national news, and then that person will get it. Whoever actually did that will get in trouble. Then there'll be some like exposés and they'll look into like, well, why did this happen? Like, and they're just like, oh, he was hearing voices. I don't know. And it's just like, look, what are we going to do? Give the contract to somebody else? Even if they did, Boeing would get dissolved, right? Because it's like, oh, they lost all their military contracts. So they would just dissolve the company, sell the land out from underneath it like fucking Red Lobster. And it's like all these people, and it's like leverage all of that shit until it disintegrates. And then the people that like made all the money out of probably shorting their own stock, knowing that this was going to happen ahead of time, are just going to take their golden parachute and apply for like fucking high-level executive jobs at whoever the next company is that they hired to replace Boeing to make stealth bombers or fucking whatever. And it just ends up being this reorganization of largely the same people, all the same policies and bullshit under some weird new name that no one recognizes, so it's a lot harder for the stuff to even come out. No one cares. Like, oh, Boeing fell apart. A few people like you and I go like, yeah, but like 90% of the same dudes run this new thing that the government's contracting with, and everyone's like, that story's already too long. What's Trump up to? Like, it just goes a fucking way. Like, that's, So literally, even if something happened, nothing would happen.
Somebody was saying that was like a high-level conspiracy going around amongst, I don't know how to describe internet conspiracy turds.
Yeah.
But just that all this stuff with Boeing is because Trump's private jet is Boeing, and somebody's going to try and crash it.
You know, it would be really funny if it just crashed itself. Because not at this point, you know, just waiting for the syphilis to get him is more fun. I don't care what happens, but like the fact that guy is such a great example of just like cheaping out on stuff to the detriment of oneself because mostly it's worked out so far, and you're just like, it's like, yeah, I use Boeing. They sold me one of the cheapest ones. I'm a good businessman. It's just like it just blows up because you're just like, well. And that's the problem, because then that'll happen. Everybody, oh, the fucking deep state killed Trump. And it's like, no, the fucking lowest bidder killed Trump. Like, he just was like, I don't want to pay full price for a fucking airplane right now. And so, you know, they gave you a deal because I'm the president. They just fished you one out of the garbage and you don't know the difference. It's just like, those puke stains on the carpet, you know, might be yours. They might have been there when you bought it, or that might be blood from, this is the plane we used to fucking shoot some malcontents in. And we also haven't maintenance in a while. You know, we used one of the old ones. And
it's kind of crazy is like, now that you say that, is like, how many people do you think have been murdered on private jets? That's a weird thought that I've never really thought about.
Why else have one, you know? Like, that's like having a... you know, like a monkey knife fight on a boat in international waters, you know, because you could just do what else is the point of being rich? Man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like having ridden around in a $200,000 car, it's like I don't really feel where all that money is gone. I wasn't driving it, but So it's like once you have billions of dollars, like just having a private jet just kick someone out the door over the ocean real quick.
Yeah.
Like who the hell is ever gonna know that happened? When the pilot does like a head, he's in your pocket. Like,
yeah.
Like, I use this one pilot in my one. I don't fly private. I have the jet. Yeah. And this guy has been flying my jet, like the fucking butler guy in Boardwalk Empire or whatever. It's like, this guy's seen some shit. I got some dirt on him. But he's my buddy, Yeah. Like, we were just like, I pay him a lot. I pay him like cartel money to fly me around because I got it to burn. And I like to take people on my jet and toss them out the door. Sometimes because they're about to bring the hammer down, and sometimes because I've just been doing coke and it seems like a lark.
It did just make me think, though. That actually kind of made me think about all the Diddy stuff, which that might be a whole other thing to go into.
Did he really do it?
Yeah, but
I think so.
It did make me think too. I was curious your thought, because this isn't totally whistleblower shit, but somewhat related, and we both have at least some level of experience with them. Is like they brought antitrust suit against Live Nation.
I heard about that.
About breaking them up.
Fucking good.
And I think
should never have taken this long.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is that, and this is not.
There's a Simpsons joke about them ripping people off from like the early 90s.
Yeah,
like Mr. Burns buys Ticketmaster, and he's like, "Who would have thought people would pay 100%, 150% service fee?" And Smith is like, "It ensures a nice mix of the wealthy and ignorant, sir." Like,
yeah. Well, it's weird because it seems like a lot of what finally tipped it over the edge, not necessarily my opinion, I'm talking this is what they're arguing in court, which is something I think you and I have seen on some level, and not even just with Live Nation, but them not just, like, people have to understand that, like, if you want to see, like, U2 at the Sphere, the amount of money that has to come out of somebody's bank account before the doors even open is crazy. Like, that's obviously goes without saying, but I think the thing you and I have, or at least I've seen, and I think you've seen too on many levels, is them now buying up local venues and muscling out all the local promoters, and now all of a sudden local bands can't get anywhere, and now all of a sudden, because it seemed like every good band that made it for a long time was still a local band at some point, even for some varying amount of time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
they started in the trenches to some degree.
Yeah, and then you work your way up to be on big tours and work with a Live Nation or whatever else. But it seemed like they were slowly buying off small venues to, on the face, probably muscle out a lot of the small promoters. On the backside, I think there may have been some tax stuff going on there.
Oh, there might.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, but may have been some things.
I don't. Yeah.
But I don't know. I was just curious your thoughts on like them breaking up Live Nation, because it seems like it was like a long time coming, and not even because they're a horrible company at their core. Like, again, you still need some level of giant production companies if you want to go see fucking Metallica US Bank Stadium.
Yeah, but that used to let me throw that used to make, like, upper management is good money, but it is nothing compared to ownership. And I think people get that a little fucked up sometimes. Like, this guy runs this company, this guy owns this company. And it's like, well, this guy has like $3 million and this guy has like $190 million. Like, it is so much. It is so that's probably not even as strong of an example as what really exists. But like, so lots of people work for Live Nation or whatever, just making as little as you can possibly get away with, paying people at a certain level with a certain amount of experience that can do things or whatever.
We've probably both known people that have worked for them.
Oh, I'm sure
on some level.
I'm sure we have, and some of them probably make less than we do. And it's like, but that's the thing. There used to be wealthy, like people like Jimmy Jam and like all the like Rose production. Like, it used to be like crazy rich people just because they were like, look, I wealth inequality is like terrible, but it's like it's gotten to this like Star Destroyer level of like, it's like, okay, so like, we can't all be rich. I would hope we would all be at least healthy and taken care of or whatever, but like it used to be that there'd be like a bunch of kind of rich people locally. There'd be a lot of backyard millionaires because of back when $1 million was a bit more money. You know, all over the place because this guy's like a big concert promoter and he's got a couple of partners and a couple of people that work for him and like whatever. And eventually it's like, this one thing, this one Death Star just owns everything. And even people who are regionally dealing with stuff are just like, you know, $200,000 a year kind of CEO people or whatever, but they're not like, I'm like a $8 million guy because I kind of started. I was like the booker at a couple of big bars, and then I started seeing if I could get in bigger acts. Then I got a line of credit in front of the money and realized I could like quintuple my money off of stuff like this and selling tickets to parking and whatever. And it's like, you could become like a successful now it's like Walmart and everything else. It's impossible. You're just like, Live Nation, they're getting to the point where it's like they don't even have to kill you because it's just hopeless to compete with them. There's nothing you can do. They own all the venues. Like, I'd like to book a show here. And it's like, well, you can't be a non-Live Nation person to do that. We own everything all the way up and down, which is making, again, this is where all the money's going. This is where the tumor just keeps on growing. Like there's no opportunity to get past just sort of an okay paying job. Because everything is it's just this one thing is owned by like 3 people and it's in the whole country. And it's like, that's where like a gazillion dollars goes to that they just sit on or whatever. And they have the operations costs and all that rich guy bullshit where they're like, well, payroll and, it's like costs money too. And it's like, yeah, but you could probably build a yacht on like a river on one of the moons of Saturn with the money that you have. Like if you wanted to, like versus like there was more people that kind of had like $5 million in a real nice house or whatever because they were kind of the guy in their city, maybe not even a major city, like maybe not even Indianapolis, maybe, like, I don't know what a good, like, just somewhere else in Indiana that's got like Bloomington, Indiana. It's got a couple of venues, a big college town. It's like, there's the guy that kind of runs that. And it's like, he's got a nice car and he's doing real good. And he's making so much more than he would if he was just an employee of Live Nation or whatever. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's that upward funnel, that chart, if you like Bernie Sanders, you always share the wealth inequalities, like goes the same as like the singularity curve, where it's just like, there's nowhere, and it's like, well, maybe you should try harder. It's like, the best I can do is working for these other people that are only going to pay me so much. If I try to compete with them, they'll literally have me killed. Yeah. And that's kind of my feeling on it. Yeah, you need someone to front all that money, but like, who gives a shit? There was people to do that in the fucking 60s when they wanted to have like the Beatles playing or something. There'd be someone with millions of dollars that like, was able to kind of, front for that or like whatever. And like, someone who like booked 9 Inch Nails at some Coliseum with all their lasers and everything like that. And it wasn't just necessarily this monolithic Walmart company.
Yeah, it is the weird sort of duality with America too, is that we have, one of the lower poverty rates, but also like, I'm pretty sure like by far the biggest income inequality from top to bottom, which is weird. It's almost like the thing with us is that we've allowed the people at the top to be more corrupt anywhere in the world in exchange for this idea that at least everybody here is born with a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
You're probably going to lose. You know what I mean? Like most people don't win the lottery, but then there also are a lot of countries where you don't even get a lottery ticket. You're just,
No, it's a difference. It's I always like to compare like American poverty with, now there is some real poverty out there in America. I'm not discounting this.
Right here in Minneapolis.
But at least for a while, it is getting so bad that it's going to probably start looking different, which is terrifying. But like, at least in like the 90s or whatever, like maybe more recently or whatever, like there's like, American poverty is like, I gotta like I own a car, but I gotta like roll the window up with a pair of pliers on the passenger side or whatever. And it's like, like I can't afford this movie, so I gotta like pirate it, and you might get a virus on my computer or whatever. And it's like poverty everywhere else is just like, I'm spearing rats in a dump with like a sharpened stick, and like the sky is just black. And like from, places like us or Europe or whatever, like using that country as a place to like make money. And just, I could just get into that too. The whole like,
we're responsible for a lot of what happens outside of our borders too.
Oh,
the bad stuff.
Yeah,
I don't sugarcoat that.
Yeah,
but it's because I'm not even saying what I'm saying is a good thing. It's just, it is interesting that it's like they've used kind of dangling that carrot in front of us here of like that you have that chance of the American dream.
There's dumbass kids on the internet that when someone, there's always an answer on something like Reddit where people are like, yeah, if we lived in this country, like, we wouldn't have to worry about student loans and everything would be taken care of. And there'd just literally be someone who's, like, being dead serious. Like, well, good luck becoming a billionaire, though. Like, and that's some just fucking Elon dick rider, dumb 12-year-old that's just, like, on the internet being like, ugh, they just entirely believe that they have a chance because they saw a YouTuber tell them that they made all this money by, like, Amazon reselling
it's always
drop shipping like, or something.
Fucking $40,000 a year.
Yeah, it's like someone figured out how to do that by drop shipping, and it's like they work 10 times as much as I do, stressing out over this. And the minute that shoe isn't popular with the broccoli haircut kids anymore, it's just like you're just going to be completely ruined. But for like 2 seconds, you like bought your dad a car and made a YouTube video about it or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's just, I'm not saying it's hopeless either, because like you can make stuff happen or whatever, but it's like, I'm just of the mind where the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, I would rather a super intelligent AI, like, just kind of was like, okay, so, like, you do realize that, like, literally everyone could live like someone who made $1 million a year in the 80s. And it's like, I'm not joking. Yeah. I don't mean, like, everyone gets to live like someone who made, like, adjusted $40,000 in like a year in the 80s, which would be kind of like a lot now or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, we go on vacation. It covers like everyone could kind of live like a lower level executive on American Psycho. Yeah. Like if a few of these people didn't just have $170 billion for like no reason, like, and like we could do it without throwing nearly as much shit in the ocean or whatever. But it's like we would have to sacrifice the just insane wealth of like a number of people I could count on my hands, or at least if I took my shoes off, like, and like no one will stand for that. But I feel like a machine that doesn't go into the sunk cost fallacy, whatever. Like, you guys could literally all be doing not even kind of good, but fucking great. Like the money that comes out of this fucking country, if everybody just got a cut, you know, just for like living here, you get like a dividend for like drinking the poisoned water in Flint. It's like, well, you get a little kickback for that, you know. The water's a little brown, but now you have like a Tesla. Like, see? Like,
that was one of the things I found fascinating about Trump's ability to be slimy, is that is basically like the richest president in modern history that somehow like convinced all the little guys that like, I'm for you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
If those guys weren't as dumb as a box of hammers, it never would have worked. And that's the only reason why when I try to have an okay conversation with someone who's like, well, you know, it's like Biden's like a politician, he's no better, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Like when I said something about the most corrupt president, and our friend Kyle was like, you mean Biden? Like, just immediately, even though he's like, both sides, I don't really look at politics. And I'm like, uh-huh.
I mean,
but. And yeah, like he's just part of the whole DNC, and I get that and everything. But like the idea, like if you're like, you know, listen, I just like Trump for blah 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 blah. The level of I know that like what this isn't a real thing that I can plainly see because you and I aren't even that smart. But like, do you have any idea how dumb average is? It's just like you watch him just like not pay his employees and just use inherited money to like start this thing. And who bankrupts a casino? Like, it's impossible to like lose that much money. And he's just like, well, you know, he's a guy just like me. I'm like, really? You were handed $190 million to do whatever you want with when you were born. And I guess the one thing you have in common with him is like, he could have just stuck it in like the stock market or a high interest rate, whatever, and like a money market account. He would have had like 80 times as much money by now, and he blew it all just like to stick his name on buildings and have golden toilets. So it's like, well, yeah, okay, so he is a little guy like you in that way, where if someone handed you the same amount of money, you'd do the exact same idiotic bullshit with it that would just make it mostly go away, just so you could get your own reality show or whatever. It's like, yeah, I guess that might be accurate.
Yeah.
And true, I guess if you handed your average Trump supporter the same amount of money Trump was bored with, he at least got a reality show and then like became president or whatever, and that person would be like, oh, I just bought coke and hookers and I only lived 3 more years after winning the lottery. I'm like, so in that way, it's sort of like, wow, I look up to this dude, you know? But it's like, you both didn't get handed like nearly $500 million adjusted for inflation when you were a kid, and all the advice in the world on how to like launder money through German bank accounts and buy up real estate and just not pay fucking contractors and stuff. It's like, yeah, you know, that's where we all came from. And the only reason that Trump's a big deal and we're not is we squandered our $500 million. And I remember when you had yours and I had mine, and we just started a band and it didn't work out. That's where it all went. No. Yeah. And it's just I can't, like, well, you know, it's like he makes a good point about a couple of things. I'm like, I guess, but I can't really listen to that stuff when it's like you fell for this thing that just makes no. I saw someone like early in his presidency wearing a T-shirt that had its airbrushed picture of Trump wearing a leather jacket, just like walking up to the front door of the White House. You know, be like that's not who this guy is. Like, this guy eats, like, well-done steak and pays $300 for it. I mean, like, what the fuck? Like, this is not a working-class guy. Like, it just... I would take some honesty, I guess. If they were just like, you know, govern me, daddy. I like when rich people tell me how to, you know, what... I'm like, okay, well, that's a you thing, and maybe that feels so... You know, it's kind of like the adult diaper thing. Like, maybe it feels good. I don't know. I'll listen to you. I might not try it, but if you really sell me, maybe I will. And listen, right now I'm admitting that I'm someone that if you speak passionately enough about shitting your pants because it gets you hard, I might try it. And I won't listen, but I'm so aware of the scam, like, that I'm like, I can't go like, oh, well, he's long gaming it, but if he collapses the economy through just idiocy and corruption, like, it'll eventually grow back better, but he knew it all along or whatever. I'm like, okay, but you think he's like a regular blue-collar guy like you, and that is just absolute, like, dementia. Like, I can't.
I did think of you that, it was very stupid and petty, but like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind
sure.
of thing that they let Trump talk on stage at the Libertarian convention and they started booing him.
Yeah. And those guys loved him at first.
And then
which is just...
I guess I started booing him though, but he literally said, he's like, oh, you know, go ahead and boo me if you want to lose, but, you know, have fun getting your 3% again.
What does that mean? 3%?
Like, that's how much of the actual vote they get.
Oh,
like the joke is not funny and petty.
I don't know.
The funny part is just that they booed him, and then he kind of basically was like,
"No, I'm kind of into what he said, actually."
You know
yeah. See, that's great, but that's not enough for me to be like, yeah, you also intentionally packed the Supreme Court with people that are overturning women's rights. I'm like, that wasn't cool. Like, I don't love that. And like,
my point was that he's so petty that he gets into a room of people that still mostly probably agree with him more than they agree with Joe Biden or whoever the alternative would be. And yet, them booing him for 2 seconds, it's like his ego, he couldn't help himself. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't just be like...
I don't know. I think he might have gotten it. In my mind,
I don't have a problem with what he said, yeah.
He might have converted a few of them, though. It's like, all right, have fun losing and getting 3%. If I was a libertarian, I'm like, okay, fine. But the problem is those libertarians are just like people with like a first grader's understanding of global economics, human nature, and society. And they're also just Republicans that kind of wish weed was legal. And Trump is not making weed legal. Like, I don't know if we know anyone like that, but that's not a fucking...
Oh, man, that's my new thing for libertarians right there. Republicans that wish weed was legal.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's like, and people that are like, okay, like, everyone's on their own, but, like, you couldn't possibly, like, outrun something to, like, kill your dinner. Like, I don't know. You drive a truck on can you build an AR-15 your own out of, like, metal and, like, things you mined out of the ground? And it's like, well, no, we have a society that works so that this will happen. I'm like, you realize, like, 90% of the tenets that need to exist for the society to be complex enough to make you an AR-15 is just rife with all the things you wish would go away. Like, it's completely idiotic. Like, I don't even really care. Like, I've had a couple of guests who I was kind of, I'm extra mean about it because how dare you be this stupid? Like, it's aggravating to me where I'm like, I don't want to again, I will always, I could be convinced to do so many things. You know what I mean? Like, so many things I wouldn't normally do. If someone just gives me a heartfelt pitch, I'm just kind of like, all right, let's go wrestle an alligator. Like, I don't, I will listen. But I'm like, I've heard some, my eyes just glaze over where I'm like, so I'm mean about it. I'm like, yeah, you have a first grade understanding. I did say that to someone that was on the show once. Like, hey. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it for a second. And it got pretty ugly because I was like, all right, well, that doesn't actually work though. And it just was like, I want you to be right. Like, I want to live in a fantasy world where everybody just gets to do whatever they want and still have the quality of, with like no oversight or like anything.
Yeah.
The problem with all that stuff is that in the 80s when Reagan just deregulated everything, and I think this was like a thing that Bill Burr had been talking about, so I won't take the credit, but he was like, they completely just went to the American public and they're like, you don't want the government telling you what to do, dude. Like, no, we definitely don't. And then they were just like, okay, so we're not going to have any kind of oversight or watchdog group about all these people that are dumping uranium into your food. Like, yeah, and then when I have a food thing, I can do that. Like whatever. It's like, all that does is give other people the freedom to fuck you in the throat. Like, that doesn't help you. Like, I started my own plumbing company and I don't want to have to like spend an extra $20 a year because there's like an EPA law about, but it's like these people are just pouring just oil into the ocean. It's like saving $20 billion a year. And again, it's, if I went from being someone that kind of had like $10 million, but I lived somewhere really expensive, like the Hamptons, where that wasn't even that much money. Yeah. And I was like, hey, John, if we start dumping like radioactive diarrhea into the drinking water where we don't live, you might start being one of these $100 million guys. Again, I'd be like, do I have to see it or do it myself? No. I could put a more.
How far away is the poop water from where all these things?
They're like, well, you know what? That might be the one saving grace for me. The one thing that'll save my soul. Because unfortunately, I know that I'm like, yeah, it's pretty far away, but like, won't the this and that current eventually bring it kind of like right here? And it's like, no, we'll probably be pretty old by then. I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to like.
I thought that a few years ago, and I'm less convinced.
Well, here's the thing, and maybe we'll kind of end on this because I don't know where I threw Dear Asshole, and I don't care to get up and look for it. But like, so I've been pitching this kind of forever, where there's like selflessness for the sake of kind of being self-righteous, and you're probably also denying a lot about. And then there's like total selfishness, and then there's this next level of selfishness where you actually realize that you have to, but this is where I am, by the way, and I'm going to defend it, but you're like, oh, like if I dump radioactive diarrhea into the drinking water, that will eventually kill me, so I don't want that. Right. And, it's like, oh, I bought all of the bathrooms in the city and turned them into pay toilets, but now, like, I'm up to my knees in pee in the street everywhere, and, like, I don't really want that. Because I have to live here or whatever, and I could just move to Dubai and just fill everywhere else with pee because someone's going to do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, eventually you kind of get to where it's like, I guess I can't burn the world down for money because I, like, live here. And so you start to be... And to me, by the way, that is the truest... Like, being the worst person imaginable and coming full circle to being like, wait a minute, I know how everything works and is interconnected to the point where I'm actually just saving my own ass here, makes you better than people who just do it because of, like, religion or because they feel bad or whatever. Because those people, like you know what you could benefit from it, and you know that it'll absolutely come and, like, blow up in your face. And you've just, like, accepted that, and you're just going to do the right thing because... No one's forcing you to. It's just that, like, you got to that level intellectually where you're like, well, fuck, like, this is how it is. Like, other people who are just like, well, dude, I think we should do the right thing. They would never survive the here's $1 million to push this button. We're not telling you who it kills. Like, they would fail that test in a second, and I would be a little bit more likely to be like, it might be me or someone I like. Damn it, I can't do it. So I don't know, like, it's the problem I've had with everything forever, which is just kind of like, I hate, like, I like acting like an idiot, but man, stupid people are just like a plague, where it's like just short-sightedness and just, easily being fooled by some, trust fund billionaire New York real estate mogul into being like, I'm just like you, we're gonna stick it to the man together, and still you believe that after everything. It's just like, he got a fucking hard. They give him a hard time, because he's trying to change the system instead of just selling, like, random secrets he finds in the White House bathroom to Saudi Arabia. I mean, oh no, they gave me a bunch of money, like, whatever. And again, like, a smarter person would think about doing stuff like that and be like, but maybe they might nuke us eventually. Like, I don't know if this is such a good idea or whatever.
It's way more fun to be angry about it.
It is a lot more fun to be angry about it. And it is also fun to be, by the way, we didn't quite have time for it, but the government basically redacted a bunch of stuff, and it turns out that like Saudi Arabia definitely kind of did 9/11, and it had nothing to do with Iraq or fucking Afghanistan or whatever. So those 20-year-long wars were for nothing, and those no effects records making fun of that were right. And Michael Moore, who else in the last 25 years has been like
Alex Jones?
Oh yeah, Alex Jones
By a lot.
Yeah,
and doesn't make him not a turd now, but
no, I didn't look what video it was under, but I get like random notifications when people leave comments. Actually, I love not looking.
I actually, can I confess, I like Alex Jones because I think he's openly a turd. I think he owns what he is, and that it's basically he knows he's like WWE of news.
I don't know. I think like if I was doing stuff like that, that's what I would love for people to believe. Like, no, I know I'm being a piece of shit. Yeah, I cut this guy's head off on TV. It's a goof.
The Sandy Hook stuff was
yeah.
That's a whole
But here, I'll admit to something. I did up until like a certain point. I also liked Alex Jones when he was like, and I think we've talked about this before. When he was like a weirdo on like local cable news, and he was blowing the lid off stuff. And he was a guy being like, dude, 9/11 like was done by these people, and these people, and there's like all of this really obvious evidence, and it wound us all up into going to all these wars that didn't make any sense, and like it didn't have anything to do with the people that actually did it or whatever. He was right about that, and so it's like people comment on YouTube videos, and my new favorite thing is like I just like look at the notification. And I might even answer it, but like I definitely don't look at what video it is. So just if someone's like yelling about random stuff, I'll just argue with them I don't even know where it's coming from, Yeah. Like some of them are of that time we watched that episode of Hoarders where the lady was eating poop, and they're just like yelling about that. I can usually tell when they're on that one because I'm like, oh, this is clearly about this. But some of them are totally random. And there was one that I got literally today or earlier, maybe it was last night. And whoever your dumbass is, I hope you're listening to this, but you probably aren't. But all it said was in all capital letters, Alex Jones is the GOAT. And I just commented, I think he's more of a fraud.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.